Hello and welcome again to the Elixir podcast, which is the podcast where we ask people from around the world if they have a poem that they really love. We ask them to read it and then we ask them why they like it. It's as simple as that. Today we're talking to Donna, who is in London, who's going to be talking to us about swans, I believe. Hello, Donna.
Hi, Helen. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. What's the poem that you've
Good.
chosen?
It's Winter Swans by Owen Shears.
Right. Okay, would you like to start by reading it to us?
Absolutely. Winter Swans. The clouds had given their all. 2 days of rain and then a break in which we walked, the waterlogged earth gulping for breath at our feet as we skirted the lake, silent and apart. Until the swans came and stopped us with a show of tipping in unison. As if rolling weights down their bodies to their heads, they halved themselves in the dark water. Icebergs of white feather paused before returning again, like boats righting in rough weather. They mate for life, you said, as they left, porcelain over the stilling water. I didn't reply, but as we moved on through the afternoon light, slow stepping in the lake's shingle and sand, I noticed our hands that had somehow swung the distance between us and folded one over the other, like a pair of wings settling after flight.
Oh, wow, Donna, that's given me shivers all over. Okay, that's a beautiful poem, and I didn't know this poem until you mentioned it to me. So, can you tell us why you like it?
Well, I first met this poem when I started teaching about 11 years ago, and it's part of the syllabus for the GCSE English. And I decided that when I was teaching the poem, I decided to do it as an unseen poem, so that myself and the students could learn about it together. We were discovering the poem together. Sometimes teaching like that makes it more interesting for the students because it's more of a learning process and an emotional process as well, because that's the key thing about this poem. It is so emotive. And I read it to them for the first time, and it was the first time that I read it as well. And my TA at the back of the class, when I finished, was in tears.
Oh,
And I was nearly in tears as well, because it's such a simple poem. It's so simple, and yet it's so emotional. And it's just it was such a wonderful shared experience in the class, and you could see that because the students could see how emotional I was, and how it had touched the TA, it had that effect on them as well.
amazing.
And we always talk to the kids about how they need to feel the poems. You teach them, sometimes you can teach them in such a didactic way of like pick out the simile and the metaphor and all that kind of thing. But really, they need to feel the poem, they need to understand it, it needs to hit them. And this was like a kind of bang moment. It was a realization that the poem is, as I say, it's very simplistic, but it really packs a punch of emotion.
And it sends that message to them that words have power, you know? It's a very important thing for them
Absolutely.
to learn, yeah?
Absolutely. And that class all said that this was the favourite poem out of the whole anthology. And I think I like to think it's got something to do with the way that they met the poem, as well as the actual construct of the poem.
So, do you read your poems out loud to them before they read it on the page? Is that what you're saying as well, that they take it on?
For me, poetry is more important that it's heard as opposed to read. And quite often, what I would do is show them a video of the actual poet reading their own poems before we then get into the nitty gritty of the poem.
Yeah, because you get
I
caught
always
up in what the words mean and how the poem is structured if you're reading it on the page. I must say, I never
Yeah,
understood poetry until I started having it read to me.
my feelings about poetry were always quite sort of ambiguous until I actually started teaching it. I'd like the popular poems and the funny poems and it had to rhyme. But then once I started teaching poetry, it really opened up a whole new anthology to me, excuse the pun, because it was just, it can really change you. Poetry can really, really change you. And this one, for me, the line "they mate for life"
Yeah.
is so kind of, it makes my spine tingle, because that's what everyone wants, isn't it? They want to have a mate, they want to have someone they can rely on, and yet so many of us don't have that luxury, and it really is quite quite, I don't know, stark, I guess.
Yeah.
And the other thing to bear in mind personally when I first read this poem was it was the beginning of the end of my marriage when I read this poem. It was the you know, everything had gone Pete Tong, so to speak. And so to read this poem, I think it kind of added an extra layer onto it, knowing that, you know, this probably wouldn't happen in my relationship. We wouldn't mate for life, and our hands wouldn't fold back over again together.
Yeah.
So it was quite emotional.
I'm sure it was. That's very, very moving. And that sense of loss in a poem as well.
Yeah. But it's a great poem. It's
It's a beautiful poem.
It doesn't do it justice.
No, could you read it to us one more time so we can listen to it, having heard what you had to say about it?
Sure. Winter Swans by Owen Shears. The clouds had given their all, 2 days of rain and then a break in which we walked, the waterlogged earth gulping for breath at our feet as we skirted the lake, silent and apart, until the swans came and stopped us with their show of tipping in unison. As if rolling weights down their bodies to their heads, they halved themselves in the dark water. Icebergs of white feather paused before returning again like boats righting in rough weather. They mate for life, you said, as they left, porcelain over the stilling water. I didn't reply, but as we moved on through the afternoon light, slowly stepping in the lake's shingle and sand, I noticed our hands that had somehow swung the distance between us and folded one over the other, like a pair of wings settling after flight.
Oh, it's just like a wish, isn't it? And like you say, it's a wish that everyone wants.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That you can have a Barney and an argument, but you actually get back together again at the end.
Yeah. And that's vision of perfection, the way that swans are. They just do seem impossibly beautiful.
Yes. And the porcelain over the stilling water is just so perfect when you see swans.
Perfect line.
Yeah, absolutely. So
will you be taking part in the swan upping this year?
No. I'm quite scared of them, actually. They can be quite vicious.
Okay. Donna, thank you so much for coming and reading your poem to us. I really appreciate it. All our readers appreciate it. Donna, thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Elixir podcast. My name is Helen Wing, and you can find more information about the poems that we talk about on my website at helenwing.com. The podcast is produced by Tom Platts at Sapien. Tom also creates each episode's original music. To find out more, go to soundsapien.com.